Chicago's Morning Answer.
Have you ever smoked?
I have.
Okay. Like
And I inhale. I did inhale.
On AM 560.
I think that it gives a lot of people joy, and we need more joy.
The Answer.
Good morning, Dan and Amy. So it is mayoral primary election eve.
Oh, I like what you did there.
Well, that's what it
It's
is.
true, yes.
And you've got, it seems to me, it's still, and everything I've heard, is still sort of up in the air. The front runners are ostensibly Preckwinkle and Daley, although you've got 5 or 6 candidates that are, bunched up within a couple points of one another, including our 2 guests this morning, the 2 Garys, Garry McCarthy, who's coming up next, and Gary Chico, who's at the bottom of the 8 o'clock hour.
And Lori Lightfoot, she seemed to have surged in the polls.
I think it helps enormously. We're talking about, at this point, a game of inches, meaning that, a few votes here or there, I think are really going to make the difference.
And don't you think there's a possibility we might not know who our next mayor is on Wednesday?
Tomorrow night. Yeah.
Tomorrow night.
Yeah.
It might take Wednesday to Thursday to possibly Friday.
This is a Chicago election.
Oh, I know. I understand that. But,
yeah.
I mean, we've got a lot of absentee ballots that need to be counted. And
It's there was 2 scenarios, right? One scenario was this election would also be a couple or 3 people separate from the pack and really put distance between themselves and the next tier of candidates. That hasn't happened. What's happened is you've got these 5 or 6 candidates that are bunched up. And so, yes, it could be a very few number of votes that separate 1 from 5, for example. And Lightfoot has benefited. She benefited last week, I saw, in this exchange she had with that dope from the Northwest Side.
oh, yeah, I got her on at like 6:30 in the morning. I said, you've got what she did was spectacular.
Yeah, Martwick. So Martwick is one of the useful idiots that the political ruling elites use to do their dirty work. So he sponsored this legislation to make the county assessor appointed rather than elected, which is obviously a Preckwinkle / closed network power play. And Lightfoot let him have it. He pushed back against her, and then she came over the top. And she wins that exchange because she did a nice job of exposing Martwick for who he is and commenting on the system for what it is. And so the real divide, it seems to me, in this election is between what's become known as the Burke Four, Preckwinkle, Mendoza, Daley, and Chico.
Yeah.
And, arguably you could throw in Jerry Joyce there, too. And then sort of insider-outsider candidates, including McCarthy, Vallis, Willie Wilson, Lori Lightfoot. That seems to me the divide, but, that's just one pundit's handle on it. By the way, I mean, no offense to our next guest, but how fun would it be if Willie Wilson and Bill Daley were in the runoff together? And then you could settle the mayor's race with a game of Scrabble. Garry McCarthy, former Chicago police chief, joins us now. Gary, thanks for being with us. Appreciate it.
Hey, morning, Dan. Good.
Morning.
How you guys doing?
Morning. So give us your closing arguments here as we sit on election eve before we get into some specific questions.
So I guess, the first thing I'm thinking about today is I just listened to the weather report for tomorrow, and we're talking 20s and some light snow. And I'm thinking to myself, the only general election in the country in the month of February. Mm-hmm. And it's just all about the gamesmanship here in Chicago. This is what we do. And, the process has produced an anointing of a mayor for decades here. And I think Chicago is waking up to it. And it's time for change. And Dan, I kind of agree with what you just said about the separation between, the has-beens and the have-nots, if we want to put it that way, with where we're bunched up in the pack here. It's does Chicago want to change or does it not want to change? I'm hearing Chicago wants to change. Everybody realizes that we're in a world of hurt in, 10 different ways. And if we always do what we always did, we'll always get what we always got. And that's the message that we've had from the beginning. By the way, it's almost a year that I've been out here campaigning, and I feel really good about it. The polling shows that, like you said, virtually any one of us could pull this thing off. Just depends on who's got the horses at the end.
Yeah, what do you want to say to the candidates who jumped in after Mayor Emanuel announced that he wasn't running again?
Amy, I've been talking about this for months. 2 things. First of all, everybody has this love for Chicago, and they've got the answers. Well, did they have that love for Chicago, and did they have those answers in August, or did it only come to them in September when Rahm jumped out? I mean, I've publicly used the word cowards. They're political cowards, and they're political opportunists. They're not doing it for the right reasons. They're doing it for themselves. Anybody who couldn't take on Rahm, how are they going to take on the problems of Chicago?
I wanted, speaking of one of the problems of Chicago being violent crime, I wanted to get your reaction to this. This legislation introduced by one of your competitors, LaShawn Ford, and I was reading about it at Second City Cop blog. This is about Terry stops, and his legislation, Ford's, I'm reading from the synopsis, provides that a peace officer shall not stop any person in a public place based upon an officer's inference from the circumstances that the person is committing, is about to commit, or has committed an offense. So I mean, the Terry stop, which has been recognized by the Supreme Court, but I'll let you get into details. But I mean, this is rather remarkable. An officer shall not stop any person in a public place based on an officer's inference that the person is committing, much less is about to or is committing. Like in the process of committing a crime, the officer still cannot. So we're just supposed to. All right, would you shoot that guy already so that we can investigate after the fact?
I mean, Dan, this goes to the direction that we've been moving in for a long time. The ACLU and the Department of Justice have somehow determined that the Supreme Court ruling on Terry versus Ohio is irrelevant, and that's what we're hearing again. I mean, the Supreme Court says that we could do it. And other people are going to go against it. It's such a confusing world out there. Data-driven policing is what's been reducing crime in this country now for decades in places like New York and Los Angeles, certainly not here in Chicago because we can't get out of our own way. And we want to eliminate the data. People are talking about eliminating the gang database, which is a cornerstone of how we got the lowest murder rates in the city since 1965, knowing who the gang members are and who they're in conflict with so that when there's a shooting, we know where the next shooting is going to occur for the retaliation. This is insanity. I mean, it's the only way to put it.
How do you feel about the legalization of marijuana and using that revenue to help the budget deficit?
I'm okay with it, Amy. I think, it's time we kind of fold the tent on marijuana. But the thing that I'm concerned about is twofold. In places like Colorado and California, they don't have municipal banks that they could deposit the money into. And as a result, it's a cash-only business. And that causes robberies and shootings to go up. The second thing is in Colorado and California, just like wise guys or white-collar criminals launder their money, the cartels are doing the same thing with the legalization out there. And we don't want to foster any sort of furthering of the cartel's business. So if we close those two back doors, just do it, get it over with, because this is a fight we're losing. I
want to get to some issues other than crime control. Interesting survey out from Civilis. This is a global real estate services provider. The best tech cities in the world. And I mean, I hear from the folks at 1871 in Chicago that's putting Chicago on the map. We've got Groupon here, and we got satellite offices of Google, and so everything's going well. Chicago's a big tech town, I understand, I'm told, except I don't see Chicago on this list of top tech towns in the world, and this was across a number of variables: business environment, tech environment, talent pool, real estate costs, mobility, and places like Santiago, Chile, Dublin, Ireland, Berlin, Seattle, Toronto, Austin, Boston, San Francisco, New York. They're on the list. Chicago not on the list. Is the Chicago as the tech boomlet? Is that another false narrative?
I don't think it's a false narrative, but I think that there's that potential to kick it into high gear. Honestly, I've gotten to know Neil Sales Griffin a little bit, and he's a tech entrepreneur, and I think that potential is here. I've spoken to a number of people, and obviously this is not my forte. But I would hire somebody along those lines to really create that incubator here and figure out what it is we have to do to kick it up to the next level, because there's opportunity there. And one of the parts of our platform that I have talked about is the fact that I want to bring back the vocational schools. And with it, I want to put technology in there also, not just plumbing and electricity and carpentry and auto repairs or whatever it is that they do now. I want to include technology in there. So I think there's definitely opportunity. I don't know how we take it to the next level, but I'll get the people who would know that, and we can make it happen.
How do you feel about reducing the number of aldermen?
I mean, it's not a fight that I'm willing to take on right away, because obviously there's plenty of battles to be fought. But what I will say is it doesn't seem to make sense to me that in a city like New York, which is 3 times the size of Chicago, I believe there's 47 or 48 aldermen. So I think that there's problems with the aldermanic prerogative. I think there's problems with no term limits. I think there's problems with the fact that you can be a tax attorney and an alderman. And some people have been saying, very interesting to me, that people who are running for 2 separate offices at the same time are saying that the alderman should not have an outside income. In other words, they shouldn't have 2 jobs. Only I can do that, right? But as long as there's no conflict of interest, I think they could have an outside job. You know, if you want to run a hot dog stand, knock yourself out, as long as it doesn't impact on conflict of interest. Look, we're in a city where there used to be a title in city government called patronage officer. I want you to just think about that for a second. We said it. This guy is in charge of patronage, and it was a title here, and we thought that that was okay. So, you know, the whole corruption issue revolves around a number of things in city government, and the Chicago way, which is we're not gonna fix anything here until we fix the corruption. And I can guarantee you, if the FBI has 18,000 recorded conversations, which is what's been publicly said regarding Danny Solis wearing a wire for 2 years, we're going to see a hell of a lot of people getting locked up over the next 2 or 3 years. Because they don't play, and they cross every T and dot every I. So the opportunity is now. Chicago has such an opportunity. If we don't take it, shame on us.
Well, and this goes to the larger issue of just the size of city government, the cost of city government, the number of employees, the salaries, not to mention the benefits packages they make. And that's where, 80% of the budget goes. It's personnel costs and associated personnel costs. Yeah. So are you willing to go places where other people fear to tread? For example, I mean, the L.A. Police Department has fewer police officers than Chicago. And obviously, L.A. is a more populous city, more spread out city than Chicago. So are you willing to look at restructuring the police department in addition to other departments in city government to reduce costs?
Sure. As a matter of fact, Dan, I was in an ongoing process of restructuring the police department. If you remember, I eliminated the top 2 slots in the department. Well, not the top 2, but 2 slots right at the top of the department, assistant superintendent and deputy superintendent. And I also consolidated 6 districts into 3 districts and 5 areas into 3 areas. So, I mean, that was something that I was undertaking. I will do the same exact thing with city government. On day 1, every at-will employee will submit a resume of what they do, how they do it, why they do it, and why them. So we could start rooting out some of this patronage that has dogged us for years. I'm pretty certain that we're going to find people with no-show jobs. I think it still goes that deep. And every single aspect of government will be examined, and we will bring business management and performance-based government to a city that's done everything politically for decades. And that will be a sea change in government here. I think it'll be a wake-up call for everybody in the city, and that's exactly what we need.
All right. He is Garry McCarthy. The website, get more information on his candidacy, Garry, Garry, GaryForChicago.com, GaryForChicago.com. And, Garry, good luck tomorrow. We appreciate you coming on.
Thanks, Dan. Thanks, Amy.
Take care.
Thank you. Have a great day.
Yep.